and Rwanda. In our region, unfortunately, Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, Mozambique, obviously Zimbabwe suffer from having really any significant investor present in those countries other than in South Africa. And the South Africans, obviously focusing on their own ecosystem, tend to not look too much beyond the borders. And so that means we rely a lot on angel networks, local angel networks, which are also nascent. Maybe Abu can enlighten us about what he knows of these angel networks there in these countries. But that's really early stage ecosystem, and I think it's very important that we have more ecosystem building interventions. So our part in this is to do this kind of events. So we get all these people together. What was amazing today, all the conversation between the startups from these 4 countries and what they can do together, what they can learn from each other. Hopefully tomorrow when the investor gets here, we get a bit more of attention on these early stage ecosystems that are less known. Zambia in particular, which I think has a lot of potential. But maybe Abu can share with us his experience running Josie Angel. And what does it take to build an angel network in an early stage ecosystem like that?
Hi everyone, good evening. Thanks for
Hi,
having me.
Yes.
Could you please ask Papama to just confirm in the WhatsApp group if it's playing properly on LinkedIn? Because
Why don't you ask him?
Okay. Is he here? But I don't want to disturb the whole meeting.
We're still learning. We're still finding ways of doing things. And it was even interesting journey about 30-stage investments. And only through the last couple of years have we focused very much on the syndicated model. And I think that is the way forward for us. A lot of people context. Separately, I've worked with a few other angel networks locally. So there is the angel network which is popped up in Botswana, angel network of Botswana, and I've helped them with some introductory content on how to run their network and just some insights on angel investing generally. And I've also been involved in the African Angel Academy, which is a Pan-African initiative. It's all done primarily virtually, and I was involved mentoring
It's now on the wired.
5 angel networks that came through that. So I worked with the angels, and then Morris Angels in Mauritius. It was interesting to see the contrast between the ecosystems. So there is some activity. I think ABAN has something like 82 network members. Most of them are quite young and most of them are still finding their feet. But it is intent to develop these things. That's great. And people are saying, where does one start? Is it the fact that we start with the network of angels and then, our research is into accelerators to then foster and find startups to grow and develop? Where does this whole thing of the scenario start when it comes to developing specifically our South African Zambia, Botswana, etc.? Yeah, I think your work as with an angel network or an incubator is very much reliant on the value chain as well. And your impact so, whether it's angel network that you rely on those incubators, whether it's an incubator producer, started to rely on the angel network to then as you put those alumni work needs to be done across the board. I think the starting point Yes, really great. I mean, when it comes back to you here is, you know, you've come on here and pioneered quite a few different projects and helping get specifically with the South African ecosystem. Are there any lessons or learnings that, I mean, is it purely based on the fact that South African infrastructure is so well advanced that we're able to develop and have such a competitive ecosystem in this country that can give the rest of the continent a run for its money? Or is it more important to what I was saying is that, you know, we need everyone to come together? What should us industry do more of to foster more edge, more growth in these smaller regions? You know, we've seen the likes of, you know, Kenya really rise to the top in the last few years, and you know, and maybe we learn something from there. We've got two places like Kigali, which is also you get to all these regions quite frequently. We work a lot with them on their experience. So, are there any lessons that we picked up from those that, you know, maybe some of the ecosystems we work on?
I think it's about really triggering this snowball effect kind of thing where, you know, as you attract capital, it will create more ventures, and in turn, it will attract more capital, and it's you're building in an ecosystem. It's a food chain, right? So to have one day the exit on the Nasdaq like Jumia, or you know, a large deal like the Flutterwave deal in Nigeria, you have to go back 10 years what happened there. And South Africa is an example of that because we had strong private equity sector. We had a lot of skills in the tech sector, and South Africans are very entrepreneurial. So you had this ecosystem building, but you know, I was talking to someone a few days ago about, you know, the first deals in the ecosystem, the building of Amazon Web Services back in 2006, and what it did to the ecosystem, you know, to build a major tech like that. And then the first, you know, large deal like Fundamo 2011 by Visa, but the startup was founded in 1999 out of a spin-off from Sanlam. So it takes a long time to actually build those things. And I think one of the guys who are actually doing great work, and other guys that started bootcamp, I mean, you know, the hard work of scaling up those entrepreneurs, supporting them along the way, connecting them with angels, ensuring they sign the right term sheet and they do the right deals, and then continuing to develop them is what incubators and accelerators do. And with that, I'd just like to get maybe Philip Kirapov, who's the CEO of South Bootcamp Africa, to talk about his experience. I mean, they're operating all over the continent and are doing some really great work in terms of ecosystem development. Philip, if you want to say a few words.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. It's awesome to be part of this. Yeah, look, we spend nights, weekends, and, you know, all doing the co-founding journey with all of these startups. And
Wow, it's really
great to talk about a story.
LinkedIn wide and YouTube. I'm not sure if the sound is coming out all right. I have to go and check the parts.
People are doing money left, right, and center. But, you know, Zach and I were just commenting on the fact that, you know, he was in our program, you know, November of 2018, you know, they had 300 alpha customers on the platform. We went out, you know, we were laughing about the story, and he was asking that we just, you know, split the bill on Nando's because, you know, $200 grand was really going to get to his pocket. You know, now the company's valued at, you know, well next to $200 million. There's exciting announcement coming soon about even more. But, you know, they're just one of 30 that have come through our program. And there's, you know, this year we had 2,200 applications to our next accelerator program. So we see, you know, the full gamut. You know, we see the startups that are never going to raise that kind of money, but are still making big impacts in their local community. And that's I think the biggest part of what we previously, when we were able to travel, is we would do these one-day fast tracks, and we would sit with anywhere from 10 to 15 startups in a local ecosystem, knowing that very unlikely that those startups would actually get into the program, but that the mentoring that we could give them in that half-day session, would be a profound impact. So, I think just winding back around to the tech ecosystems.
You hear what I said? Papa says you can barely hear the sound.
I can barely.
Yeah.
All day,
We have a microphone.
Spaces that you do investor groups. It's all of us working together. I think that moves the needle in pride and the success stories.
So suppose I have to go into a different room and put my phone on.
Very proud about.
We don't have a quiet room.
These entrepreneurs that will make a big
You're not.
but who are.
How are you connecting the sound? Not through the mic, right?
So the way it works is going to my phone, it feeds to my PC. But the last time I was in my own room, so I had the whole volume on my phone.
So the biggest problem, of course, is that a lot of the most significant shareholders in a lot of those companies aren't on the continent. So they're sitting elsewhere. And so when those exits happen, those big rounds happen, there's only a small portion of that is rolling down to the African founders who were present in Africa. Now, still at the same time, you see the expat founders or even the local founders that are sitting offshore. Of course, they're supporting the next round of investments, and we can point to some anecdotal experiences. But it's just something that's going to go. I mean, it's going to take it's going to take a generation before there's enough of those that it starts to become just second nature. And I mean that's the journey we're on. It's exciting, but it's not going to happen in the short term. But I do absolutely. I see the biggest amount of that coming through organized angel groups, and when I see Abu's on here, he can talk about the numbers more deftly than I can. But I mean, there's been an explosion of these angel groups, and a lot of that has been former founders that have either had an exit or have made enough investments that they're starting to have some reasonable liquidity and want to spread the love. So I certainly think that's a trend that we're going to continue to see.
Yeah, very valid points. Would you care to chime in there? Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it is a trend. I think we saw it in Cape ecosystem and had a few big early wins.
Working? Is it working?
I take this to a different room.
Silicon Cape, and a lot of the development in the early days was really on the back of some of the work they were doing. So it's knowledge, it's capital. There has been a recycling of a lot of those resources from IT. And I think that's the only way that ecosystems are going to grow exponentially. It's just getting
Awesome stuff. I guess this brings us to the next question. Where does corporate play in all of this? First off, I mean, maybe I'll bring you in here because through the open corporate innovation challenges and I've given this my many times. First off, I mean, marriages fail. But I definitely believe that corporate has a role to play in helping expand as well, alongside of venture capital and the various other funds that come into the country. What are your thoughts on that? still early stage as well. What are your thoughts on particularly African corporates? I think both ourselves and startup cameraman, 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 and within the corporate. So on paper it sounds like a good idea, but in practice it's really hard. Corporates tend to have a non-invented here syndrome in many areas. Even if you have an open innovation department in the corporate pushing for it, a corporate is a process machine, and it doesn't like to be disrupted. Actually, that's like a good idea, but in practice, it's new processes and ideas. So you have to really embed that in the culture of the organization. Too many corporates are just doing this for paying lip service to the innovation story. So do the PR marketing play, do events, be cool with startup, rub shoulders. But at the end of the day, when we look at actual collaboration, it's much more difficult. So, we've run, I think, nearly 50 open innovation challenges in the last 4 years. Fair to say that a number of them have been fantastic successes, but the majority of them have been struggles, difficult, or actually nothing happening for a number of reasons. So we have great success stories and we have great difficult stories. So I think corporates are an essential component of the ecosystem. They will be the one producing the largest exits in the end. And I think they're waking up to this. That's what we can see now in US and European corporates being more aggressive and more mature on that. In South Africa, we've had great examples of this collaboration, Standard Bank, SnapScan, typical one, but it seems not replicable. Like Standard Bank hasn't been able to produce like a similar success to that magnitude. Why is that? I would say because the resistance to change within the corporate are too high. But I'm sure Philippe has a lot of war stories to tell as well. Many collaboration with corporates. But in a nutshell, again, early stage, very difficult, and we're only at the beginning of this. But that's community.
Yeah, I'm going to hop off in 5 minutes, but I'll definitely, and I'll try not to take this entire time speaking on this topic, but it is a point of great joy and pain when the corporates join into these programs and in a concerted way. There are fantastic results. We had in our last program some phenomenal corporate partners that really, threw significant resources behind it. What you see, as Christophe was alluding to, is that the machine itself is designed to weed out that. So, we always refer to it as really just kind of white blood cells, inside the organization, and anything that looks foreign gets attacked. And that's the very nature of what disruption is. So the efficiency of the machine is being impacted adversely. The machine is going to beat that out. So the only way that it works successfully is when these organizations set up what we refer to as dual core, but effectively a labs type environment or a venture building arm or whatever you want to call it, sitting really with almost entirely the machine for it inside the organization. So it's funded, but it's got to have its own governance. It's got to have its own team that's usually pretty small, 3 to 5 people. And there's sufficient independence that these ventures can thrive. And what we struggle with, or what we see these corporations struggling with, is that as soon as you start to have a hint of success, the inclination is to then absorb it back into the mothership, which of course, if that's done too early, ends up killing it. So, we have had significant.
So this is why I need assistance from you.
The first batch of startup TM cohorts, the 30 startups did over 62 POCs and pilots, many of which turned into agreements. Another KPI is that 50% of all the startups that have come to our program are still operating without needing any follow-on venture funding. So they've taken no additional capital, but they're successful because they built commercial partnerships on the back of those pilots and POCs. So they became self-sustaining, and so that's when the model works. That's a phenomenal success metric from our perspective. It also means that when we start talking about venture capital and going out and raising bigger rounds, if you're a startup that's gone and built viable traction and you validated your model through these larger corporate contracts, you're in a much better position to demand favorable terms. So a lot of the work we're doing with DCA and through the various collaborations and conferences is trying to help startups to avoid falling into traps where they're signing aggressive term sheets or falling kind of getting taken advantage of in these negotiations. And one of the best ways that we help these startups to defend themselves is by having viable businesses that become really attractive and they don't need the funding. So when they're going out to raise capital, they're doing it at the terms that you find attractive and not out of desperation. So yeah, it's kind of a very, very, very high level summary on the topic. And apologies, I'm going to have to drop off for another call. But I will see most of you tomorrow at AfricArena.
Thank you so much, Philip. Thanks for dropping in. We appreciate your insights, and yeah, that'll be cool.
Okay, thanks guys. Cheers.
Darren, I'd like to bring you into the conversation here. For those who don't know, Darren, I'm co-author of the AfricArena course on the state of taking Africa. Darren, and I thought maybe, kind of picking up what we had from last time is, have you noticed any kind of, what were some of the findings that you found in around kind of synergies within Southern Africa, or just kind of key lessons or points that maybe the audience could learn from around some of the findings that you discovered the rest of the team put together in that report?
Thanks, Patrick. You put me on the spot. It's been a long week. Yeah, in terms of some of the findings, I guess it's Tuesday. It's been a long week for the last 3 weeks.
The week doesn't end.
I guess, one of the findings that we could see was that a lot of the investors were collaborating with other investors, especially during the COVID period. And I think that's probably continuing. And another interesting thing that I noticed was the rise in and I guess you can kind of, you can still see that. So yesterday, announcement at Sequoia, the 5 trades for Egyptian digital bank, basically. So that's, I think, Sequoia is very few investments into so what that shows is just the continued interest into Egypt and also Africa in general. And I think that was one of the conversations that we had on a previous Clubhouse discussion was kind of, can't even remember if it was an African one. It's kind of the question about is about valuations of the African startups now.
Help startups to avoid falling into traps when they're signing.
And what we found is that I think the Kenyan and East African region valuations, they appear to be quite top-ish. was mainly as a result of lots of foreign capital going into East Africa, because historically it has been quite sort of a destination for impact investors, so that has created some sort of kind of like a hothouse effect that type of startups in East Africa, as well as also tech-related startups in Nigeria, East Africa, and specifically in Nigeria. So there was some questions that have been discussed, and just related to that, it's also to bear in mind that globally interest rates are quite low. So there are investors out there everywhere else searching for higher yielding assets. And I suppose that is one thing to bear in mind. But on other sort of sectors, besides fintech and agri-tech and other regions, I would say that for those less connected, less networked individuals, or at least startup founders, then potentially those type of investments, those type of startups might offer better value in regions where there is less of a hothouse effect, like less well-known regions like Zambia, Tanzania, countries like that. So one of the discussions once that one of the investors we spoke to, their comments was that some of those countries, they are finding a bit more value, especially as they're finding less opportunities in Kenya and Nigeria. So that's some of the comments from what I've seen since we completed the release.
Thanks, Darren. Appreciate that. I guess, so coming back to kind of just to give a little bit of where we're at with, this conversation today is that I was mentioned that there is a trend where we've got angels coming together, growing networks, fostering synergies and relationships there. And that while difficult, there are a few synergies that have been taking place through corporate innovation. I mean, we've seen a massive, an example of something that really worked there was, to Philip's point earlier, was Acronis, who recently acquired Houses, which is a South African tech cybersecurity firm. They partnered with him for a very long time.
The question about Synergies,
before acquiring. Just the question is, does that money get recycled? And it's good to hear that it is. What is happening, and maybe Christoph, you can speak to this point, having been up in Johannesburg, is there a lot of happening in terms of more on our infrastructure level? So for instance, we've got a massive problem with data being a huge cost to access to digital information. I think Africans probably pay one of the highest data rates in the world compared to our European, American counterparts. We've got things like the Startup Act, which locally being driven. What other infrastructure or kind of regulatory things could Africa do more on, and how do we get more movement happening in these areas? Data being one, regulations like startup acts, helping startup ecosystems thrive instead of just survive. Christoph and Abu, you get to kind of chime in and chat to think of those points.
Yeah, I can come in that quickly. I think, the data thing, when I got to South Africa 17 years ago, that was really a major constraint compared to other emerging economy or even emerging markets. We've seen a lot of investment in the last 10 years. I mean, we're seeing also the announcement for further investment. You heard about the Google announcement recently that is putting down a new cable arriving in Melbourne. The speed of the internet that we have in Southern Africa has been, exponentially growing and has been catching up with what we see in other economies. So I think it's no longer really a restrainer, to be honest. It's going to keep improving. Data costs still a bit high, but coming down fast, especially in the last 3-4 years. We've seen the impact of fiber rollout. in major South African metros. So that's been very positive. I mean, I've got a lot of connection in my network during the lockdown. People from France or US, Germany, coming to work in Cape Town, for example, just because they could do their business from Cape Town in a much more pleasant way than staying locked down in Paris or Berlin or somewhere in the US. So I think that, we're kind of seeing that past. The issue is not there. The issue that we have, particularly in South Africa, is all this red tape, regulation that we have obsolete regulatory framework in many areas, particularly pertaining to capital movement. And that is a major problem for VC and for LPs to invest in our ecosystem. The same for IP. IP regulation in South Africa are very tight, the tightest in the world, and are not very friendly for enabling to create a knowledge startup or an IP-based type of venture. To the extent that what happened, it's almost automatic now. Every startup that reaches Series A is really locating its holding company in Delaware or Amsterdam or wherever else. I mean, that's quite sad because it's loss of taxpayers' money potentially, and it's also sometimes loss of talent, because once you put your whole company in the Netherlands, then the next thing you have to do is you have to employ your developers from there. Next thing you have to do to give substances to move the developers there. And so we've seen that in a number of examples. And that's not really great. So we are very involved in lobbying for Startup Act in South Africa, whatever that means. A set of measures to modernize our framework and regulation to make it really attractive to come and create venture in South Africa. Because I think we have a great country, great talent, an interesting market, on the continent, and we're able to scale. Let's not forget that some of the most interesting venture we have in the world at the moment were created in South Africa. Let's remember the Get Smarter, the Shopify, and similar. Let's remember that Amazon Web Services was engineered in South Africa, where we're able to build and scale global technologies and venture from here. And what's happening in Nigeria with Floodwave and similar is the same story. So, that's really my take on this. I'm really keen to hear on that. It started is the same story. Is it going to do anything to the angel community? Is it going to attract more VC? I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think it is coming, but it's just being slow. We are seeing lots of other countries around the world adopt startup-friendly approaches to legislation, whether it's Portugal, India, Germany, the US. You look everywhere you look, people are finding ways, or governments are finding ways of attracting top talent. Coming through the means of tax breaks, it's coming through tax deductions for angel investors, grants. In Germany, there's grants that are being given back for the investment. The rest of the world is moving a lot quicker than us, unfortunately. And if anything, in recent weeks and months, we've moved in the opposite direction with the cancellation of Section 12J. It was always set to end in June 2021. A lot of local experts did expect it to be extended, but Treasury decided to cancel it. Some may say that it is due to some of the tax collection pressures that we've been under as an economy. I have heard that there are plans to put incentives in place as a replacement. Nothing has been mentioned or talked about in detail, but that was, if you look at our ecosystem, the South African ecosystem as a whole, I think the one thing that we have almost exceeded expectations on is the venture capital space. To a large degree, that has been due to Section 12J. I think if you did a cross-section of the entire ecosystem, the VC space is probably the most Section 12J. I think if you did a cross-section of that, the entire capital flooded in that direction due to Section 12J.
Sure, very, very disconcerting. For people listening either live or to a podcast in later stage, can you just chat a bit what that means for an entrepreneur or for an investor? Like, what does the removing of the Section 12J actually mean?
Sorry, that's directed at me, Patrick.
Yeah, please, yeah.
So, up until June 2021, the individuals making contributions to registered venture capital vehicles were able to use those contributions to offset their tax liability to start. So if you invest 100,000 in a registered venture capital vehicle, Christoph mentioned our friend at Cologne Ventures Club, but if you invested in a Cologne Ventures venture capital fund, you would be able to use that contribution to offset your tax liability with SARS. That is coming to an end as of June 2021. And from my understanding, the reasoning for that is we found that a lot of high net worth individuals were SARS, a lot of high net worth individuals were making big contributions to these funds, and that was causing a strain on the tax collection. And also, there were Section 12J schemes that were being used for the wrong purposes. It was used really, or the intention was job creation, it was venture creation, but a lot of schemes were being established as structures where people were able to bypass tax liabilities and using it for the wrong means. Those two are the reasons that I understand that it's now being cancelled. But like I said, I do believe that there are initiatives that are being developed in the background that may replace it at some point in the future.
Thank you, Abu. Thanks for giving the insight there. Yeah, massive knock-on effect there, and I sincerely hope our government, and this is going to be our biggest challenge.
The problem is that government takes a decision like that, but there's nothing in front to say, okay, let's equalize the situation. Like Cologne Venture, the 12J fund that Abu mentioned, is arguably one of the most dynamic and successful VC fund in South Africa, and it's been amazing investment and enabled many entrepreneurs to be successful, create jobs, and put South Africa on the map. So, what's the response to removing 12J? Like we yet to see anything tangible. There's been a small amendment on eliminating the loop structure issue, but it's too little, too late. So we are holding with many ecosystem buyers an event on the 3rd of June with many entrepreneurs in Cape Town to try to talk about co-creating a startup act or whatever set of measures to take our country forward, because we cannot have it that we're eliminating and making things actually worse than they were a year ago when the rest of the world is moving along. I mean, Tunisia has passed the Startup Act 4 years ago, Senegal more than a year ago. Kenya has drafted the law. Many African countries are busy drafting the law. In South Africa, we're still busy holding investor conferences, Well, investor conferences, they come and they say there's too many constraints here. And then when they see an interesting investment, they'll rather flip it over and move it to Delaware. So I really think it's time to wake up. And so we are holding as a collective this event together with many other initiatives with the support of the World Bank and other organizations to try to engage with government on, really taking a more modern, proactive approach. I mean, government wants to create jobs, so do entrepreneurs. So they need the capital to do so, and we can work together to resolve that. But it's really time to put a different lens on looking at this problem. So we're hopeful that something's going to happen, but it does take a lot of time. So and I don't see in our region a lot of collaboration on this topic. So the risk is South Africa being the locomotive of Southern Africa, that we're going to be left kind of behind. Remember, 4 years ago, South Africa was top ecosystem in terms of investment attraction, top ecosystem. 36% of the money would come to South Africa. And now we are down below 20%. So everything happens for a reason.
Certainly, some interesting stats there. So I mean, while it is all doom and gloom, let's chat about some of those. To finish off, I'm going to call it at 6:30. Is what great synergies are happening. I mean, have we seen? I mean, Darren, Henry, I don't know. I see we've got Kim listening in. We've seen a couple of synergies happening. For instance, in the distribution space, we've got people like, and I mean, I know that they're no longer startups, but it all trickles down. I mean, you've got people like Amazon needing distribution done by DHL, and then DHL acquiring a couple of last mile companies that help them with their last mile deliveries that are all tech focused. Where else are there been some really great synergies that are happening throughout the continent, or what great things are happening that we can maybe leverage off and look forward to or follow, check out, so that we can, amongst all the challenges, that there is something that we can kind of hold on to and maybe and look forward to or follow, check out.
Go for it, Abu.
Yeah, so look, I think we globally, we're in a tough place at the moment. And whether you look at South Africa, the continent, you look at Latin America, emerging markets are struggling. And there's been protests globally around the way the governments have handled this pandemic. Economies have struggled, unemployment shot up across most emerging markets, and the expectations are that we'll have a dual recovery. Wealthy economies recover faster than the developing economies, and that's just going to widen the inequality gap, unfortunately. So we're not alone in going through these tough times, and that's the first contextual point. The second point is it's not all doom and gloom. I think there's a lot that we do have. We are seeing, and to some of the earlier discussions and points, we are seeing a lot more corporate activity. So we did see Pick n Pay buying bottles, we saw Mr. Price buying Happy Chef. I'm involved in the banking institutions, local listed banking institutions, who's pouring a lot of money into the financial fintech space. So we are starting to see corporates become more involved, and I think there is the sense that a sense of greater digital adoption. The one thing we have learned through this pandemic is that we can do things online and probably more efficient than we thought we would be by doing things online. And that is the way of the future. That is the way things are going. And we need to embrace it, or we may get disintermediated. So a lot of corporates are looking at digital solutions. And just in terms of South Africa versus the rest of the world, and I think Christoph mentioned that we've got a great climate, we've got affordable talent, and that's one thing that is in short supply globally is talent. We've got affordable talent, and we've got good infrastructure, decent infrastructure that's comparable to anywhere else on the continent. I think, if we tweak legislation, if we tweak the legislation around things like intellectual property and helped entrepreneurs play that long game where IP can come in and out of the country a bit easier, I think we'd have a much hotter prospect of an ecosystem.
Awesome stuff. Thanks for that. Christoph? Darren?
Yeah, no, obviously I totally agree with what Abu said. Not at all doom and gloom. We just, I'm primarily an entrepreneur, and I get so frustrated that we're not doing more and we're not doing more faster. So that's why. But we're not, waiting by the sidelines. The fact that there is a collective working on this issue in South Africa specifically, with many organizations from VC founders, angels, corporates, to try to make the whole thing better. It's very encouraging. I think there's been a lot more cooperation and competition in recent months. Part of it as a result, I think, of COVID-19 pandemic situation. And people are really working hard to get a change here. I just wish government would listen more actively and engage. So yeah, that's really the point. But very optimistic in the mid to long term about the economy of the continent and particularly region. I think South Africa has unique differentiators and the region around would do well to better cooperate and collaborate. So that's why having these entrepreneurs from Mozambique, Zambia, Botswana with us, it's really refreshing and it's really quite magical to see as they were today working and attending this with all the South African entrepreneurs. And I think we're going to have a great 2 days, tomorrow and Thursday, listening to top minds of the ecosystem, including Abu, and see some of these startups pitching and showing us what they're building. It's really exciting.
Awesome stuff. Thanks, Christophe. For those listening or who want to follow in tomorrow or check it, is there a live stream possibly available, or is there anything like that you guys can listen to?
Yeah, so like this is actually a podcast recording and it's streaming on LinkedIn and YouTube and on AfricArena channels. The event tomorrow will be available on all our channels. AfricArena.com, the website. You just plug in there and watch the event from there live. Our mobile application, AfricArena, Android and iOS apps, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. So there are many ways to listen to all of this and to see these entrepreneurs pitching. And we typically have an audience of hundreds of people in digitally when we are constrained here in Centon to only host maximum, less than 100 people. So that's the new world, right? We are in a hybrid world, so most of the audience is in the cloud, but the engagement is actually higher, so that's exciting.
Awesome stuff. And then I see we've got Evelyn and Frederico, who represents Mozambican and as well as Zambian markets. I don't know if you guys wanted to just jump on and kind of help us close off, or if there are any.
Scared Frederico.
Yeah, looks like he's back. I don't know if there are any synergies or success stories you guys have come across, in your various markets. Would love to hear from them. Would love to hear them. Evelyn, you want to jump on stage quick before we sign off, or we'll wrap things up here? And Darren, if there's anything you'd like to add to that, maybe some of the research that you come across with working with the VCs, also the reports. I don't know if you want to add any thoughts to what Christophe and Abu have already shared.
Yeah, I suppose the only comment I'd make is, hopefully there's still a lot of synergies, and not necessarily synergies, but just a lot of work together across various different ecosystems within the continent and also in South Africa as well to increase the possibilities for startups to raise capital. So hopefully that will just continue to get better. There's a few collectives. So there's the Digital Collective Africa, which is working together to try to various different work streams to improve the ecosystem in South Africa and Africa, and hopefully those collaborations will continue.
Awesome stuff. Thanks, Darren. Frederico, thanks for joining us. I thought, before we wrap up, maybe just get some thoughts. You seem that you quite well with the Mozambican tech ecosystem, and maybe you could speak to some of the synergies that you're finding, or kind of trends that you're noticing that are working or not working, or what do we need more of, or what do we need, what's working that we could all focus on and help gain them more support.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Well, just to give you a brief on what the startup ecosystem is like in Mozambique. We're very early stage. I think that I can say that we started about 2014 was when a couple of events came together around startups. Looking back, I think there was enough was when a couple of events came together around startups.
the startups that actually progress and become attractive businesses, so that the local investor community can be more excited about putting money in tech. I feel that we have lots to learn still. I'm in South Africa right now, participating in the AfricArena, and I hope you can see that there's a lot of maturity in the startups on this side, a lot of VC funding. There's a whole journey that's put together to succeed, and all the supporting systems are there. Of course, there's challenges. I'm not saying that there's always going to be challenges, but I just feel that our market is, the talent is there, but we still don't have the required structure. So if I was going to look at synergies, it would have to be about that. So start teaching the local investor community about the rewards of investing in tech. Africa is really our platform. So a lot of the problems that we target in Mozambique are relevant in the neighboring countries. And so I think once this vision becomes solid, investors would understand that it's actually you can actually mitigate, you can actually invest in early stage and reap the benefits at a longer stage, but they need to be educated to do so. And yes, as I said, we need the references first. We need some level of education, both on the startup side and the investment side, for us to move further.
There's some really great insights there, Frederica. Thanks for sharing, and we wish you well. I think it's so great to just have that share of voice, and it's a lot of work. I think it's just, it's warming to know that there is synergy taking place already. I mean, the AfricArena team have done an incredible job around kind of trying to be the glue between all the ecosystem players and stakeholders, and I know they'll continue to do that as difficult and as challenging as it is. And the point of these regular Clubhouse conversations, the idea is to have these every Tuesday, where we just have a selection of voices representing different ecosystem stakeholders across the continent to share ideas, insights, and opportunities and challenges that they may have, so that we can all collectively learn. So that's it. Thank you to all of you guys for joining. Thank you, Abu. Thank you, Henry, for recording. And as mentioned by Christoph, this will be available live across all the AfricArena channels, YouTube, on the AfricArena Wide app, as a podcast, for you to re-listen to at a later stage. And of course, stay tuned for next episodes in the forthcoming weeks. If you'd like to tap into what is happening in greater detail around these Southern African tech ecosystems, do tune into the AfricArena channels tomorrow, as mentioned, or download the app, AfricArena, on the various stores, so that you can tune into what is happening from that event taking place in Johannesburg. Christoph, massive thanks to you for helping pull this all together, and thanks to everyone who listened in, and I wish you all a great evening and rest of your week.